Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
Hey, I'm Hannah. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Hannah.
And my sobriety date is September 21st, 2010. And I have a sponsor, and I sponsor. And I started drinking on the regular around age 14. I was kind of in and out of the house, sort of half-assed teenage runaway. I would be gone for a week at a time and off drinking. I lived in a really rural area in my teens, so I would be in the middle of the woods and I would hitchhike into the nearest town and just, tie one on there. And after a week or so, my mom would call the highway patrol and send them out looking for me. And I would be found, and then I'd come home, things would settle down, and then I would get in a fight with my dad, and I would either get thrown out or I would run away. And so this is the pattern of my teenage years. And I was in a lot of turmoil, and alcohol just made me feel like everything was okay. It made me forget my problems. And I hung out with people who drank like I did. Like I would go to a party with other teenagers, and there would be people having a beer, or like, this will date me, but a Zima, whatever. And then I would find the other room where we were drinking like straight Jack Daniels and like sitting around listening to Tom Waits and feeling very like we were already crusty old drunks. Drugs are part of my story. Since I started young, it was a lot easier to get drugs than alcohol regularly. But I would still find ways. I'd stand in front of the Safeway in Fort Bragg and beg for change in my own hometown. Shameless. Beg for change until I had enough, and then find somebody to buy for us, who, we would give them some alcohol too. And we tried to come up with creative ways to get change. I remember I had a friend who would put his mohawk up into spikes and like break a balloon for $1. Skateboard tricks, whatever, But the good times did not last. I quickly, found out it was pretty uncomfortable sleeping outside. And so I found this house where I thought it would be a good place to stay and sleep at least on a floor. Little did I know these kids were sneaking out to the local veterinary clinic and stealing ketamine. And the local police thought I was part of this problem. And so I quickly found and the other thing, this is in Mendocino County, there was like a Grow ripoff drama happening around this house too. So I had like one group of people who were after the Grow ripoff folks, and then I had the police who were looking after the doggy dope thieves. And it was just a bad scene. And I was like, I'm just trying to stay drunk and dry from the rain, So anyway, I ended up at a Denny's at 3 a.m. With a couple of home bum friends, one of whom thought his brother was in the Beastie Boys and would always talk about that. It was always a good topic of conversation. And this man walks in and looks at me. I had recognized him from parties and stuff, and he was like, "Do you want to be here?" And I was like, No, I don't. So I left Denny's with him. 6 months later, he proposed. And I was 18, and I was off the street. That was a pretty good solution at the time. And he was also getting clean, which was convenient, but that did not include alcohol. That was just from drugs. We thought we were doing really well. We would have like a case of vodka in our room. And it was just madness. I remember parties like New Year's Eve party, people came over and for some reason everybody brought a gun, and the our kitchen table was covered in firearms, and that was just like, oh, that was a good time, I ran across somebody like years later who was like, I once went to the craziest party, and I was like, that was my house. I remember that, yeah. Anyway, I was married for a while. We tried to clean things up a little bit with the drinking. Got really into doing martial arts, which was good for us. There was like a spiritual element, and I couldn't get that drunk and then go train. So it was kind of like kept things under control. And then my appendix blew up and I got pain pills, and I had no program. And so my ex-husband came home and saw me with a fake of gas. You see that? And my Valium, and he was like, I'm just not doing this. And I was like, come on, we can go to counseling and couples counseling. And he didn't stick around long for that. And then, shortly after that, I got served some papers, and I was divorced. And so, I was living in a house with a bunch of girls, and, around that time, I got into activism, and I thought that was going to be my solution. Because I always wanted to be a good person, I always wanted to make a difference. I always wanted to promote equality and justice in the world. Like, I had these grand ideas, but I couldn't take care of myself. But I found some people in the activist scene who weren't drinking, so I hung out with them. I was like, I think I might be an alcoholic, and I think one of them had maybe been to some AA, because he was like, well, I can't tell you if you are or not, but, why don't you try to stop and see what happens, And so I kind of went into this weird activist workaholic mode where I was going to fight the system, and every once in a while the pressure would get to me, and I'd start to head to the bar, and then I'd call back to this like weird activist commune house where we all lived and worked together and played in a band together and did everything together. And they would say to me, just come back, we'll smoke some weed. You don't need to go to the bar. And so in that way I came stayed kind of California sober or whatever. And then what happened? Then they weren't hardcore enough for me. I felt like they sold out. So that was the last straw. And I went to the bar by myself and drank at them. And I was in my late 20s, and it was Halloween. I dressed up as Joan Jett. I met some train hopper kid coming through town, and I was like, I'm going to go hop trains with you. And I just stayed in my Halloween costume. that was just my clothes. And things got really weird really fast. I have vague flashes of memory, like being in a car, drinking peel liquor out of a ketchup squeeze bottle, or, weird hitchhiking times. And then I ended up back in Oakland. I was born here in the Bay. And I just kept messing up. I just kept running into people who didn't want to talk to me. I was trying to be part of the activist scene here, and people were like, we don't really want you to because you're more of a burden. You're more of a liability at this point. And then I ran into somebody who I had screwed over, and he was like, you seem like you want to be a good person. Why are you acting this way? And for some reason, that was what got me. I was like, because I'm an alcoholic. It was just that kindness of I see you, I see what you're trying to be, just got to me. And I went to a meeting. I heard what I felt like was my story, only much more progressed. And it scared the shit out of me. And I just hung on. And I had a lot of chronic pain at the time. My hands were going numb. My liver was enlarged. Go figure. But so basically I lost my job because after I stopped drinking, that was my pain management. I couldn't use my hands. And so I just had all this time to go to meetings. So I went to multiple meetings a day. I had a hardcore sponsor who was like, you need to get 3 commitments. And she was super tough with me, and I needed that. What's going on today? My life is super different. I wrote and produced a play over the last summer, which is, like coming back around to something that I always wanted to do. And my challenge today, and this is what I don't want to say, but I've taught, like, that's what you need to say, to be honest, is like being my full self, like shining as much as I possibly can and not hiding out in the rooms, because the rooms have been a really safe and comforting place for me. But right now I'm just working on a second play, and I've sent it out to some people, but it scares the hell out of me, because when I do that creative stuff that like makes my heart feel good, I go so hard. Like, I just wear myself out. I don't have any pacing. So that's what I'm struggling with right now, which is like super high class. Awesome problem to have. So I'm looking forward to hear what Joe has to say. Thanks for letting me share. Thanks.
All right.
Do you want this?
Sure. All right. Get mic'd in here.
Ooh, yeah.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Joe. And my first sponsor told me to say that first so I could remind myself and everybody else in the room that that's what we're here for. I have a sponsor. He's in the room. He has a sponsor, and I sponsor other guys. And that's how I really think this thing works. My sobriety works through the act of service and being a service and not telling AA no. My sobriety date is April 20th, 2005. And by the grace of God, I have a little over 11 years. And that's not because I don't get in my own way. So let me tell you a little bit about what it was like. I grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous. My dad's been sober since before I was born. He got sober 11/19/1979. And my mom got sober when I was 5. So I grew up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been watching alcoholics my entire life. And so when I was experimenting with things that made me feel like I wasn't myself, I decided I didn't want to be an alcoholic. So I immediately set out to be a drug addict. And so there's a lot of drugs in my story, but I really don't think there's a difference. I've never met an alcoholic that can do cocaine casually on the weekends, and I've never met any cokeheads that could drink better than me. So, I really think it's the same thing. With that being said, I started really early, and I remember my first drink, my first cigarette, and my first sexual experience really vividly. It was 4th grade. I had my girlfriend. Her name was Carolyn. It was my first girlfriend ever, and we finished a 12-pack of Coors Light, smoked a half a carton of Salem Menthol Lights, and all I remember is vomiting. It was almost instant blackout, and I threw up the entire time. The other thing I remember was the most visceral of that whole experience was the guilt. Growing up in Alcoholics Anonymous, I never enjoyed what I did. I never had that aspect of feeling like it all went away. My drinking was immediately guilt-ridden, and I felt like I was doing something horrible. So I went home and I told on myself. And I was grounded for the next 2 months. And I didn't drink again for a while. I didn't drink again until 6th grade. And, hey, I was an early bloomer. But I found pot in 6th grade. We had moved to Arizona, and we lived half on an Indian reservation in this little town called Clarkdale, Arizona. And it was Clarkdale and Jerome. The two little towns had one elementary school, and all the res kids went to the same elementary school. And I was already bad at making friends. My dad's kind of nomadic. We moved every 3 years. So I immediately set forth to find the easiest people to get along with. And it was this native Navajo guy named Sonny, and he was the biggest kid in the class, and he was super quiet, and nobody else would talk to him because of his size. He was a 6-foot-tall 5th grader. And both of his parents were over 7 feet tall. So he was very intimidating, but didn't have any friends. I was like, all right. And Sonny's sister taught Sonny and I how to smoke pot. And so that's what I did. I hung out with Sonny, and I smoked pot, and I hung out on the res, and then his dad taught us how to drink. And it just continued like that. So my dad explains my drinking is like getting on at the top floor, and instead of getting off and checking every floor out, I hit the button straight to hell. By 7th grade, I was already smoking crystal meth, and my buddy Brian, his dad made it in the basement of their mortuary. So we stole speed from the mortician, and we were already selling pot and selling speed and doing tons of it, and I was getting ready to get expelled from 7th grade. So my parents knew that they had to get me out of there, so we moved again, and we moved to Mexico. So now I was the only white kid in a Mexican school, which was great for two things. I speak Spanish fluently, and I know how to hold my own in a fight. But I also learned how to drink really well there because I couldn't find any drugs. I didn't know the language. I was too afraid, and the only coping mechanisms I had was drinking. And you could drink in Mexico if you could reach the bar. So that's what I did. We would go to school. This was 7th and 8th grade, and I went to school from 7 a.m. to noon, and then the rest of the day you had to yourself. It was a private Mexican school. So we would leave at noon. Me and my buddy Robin would go to the taqueria that would give us tequila and Fanta. And we would drink until we couldn't see and then go surf the rest of the day. And surfing would kind of balance us out to where we could go home to our parents and we weren't stumbling drunk. It was perfect. And we did that every day. I did that every day for the 2 years I lived there. So by 12, I was a daily drunk. We moved to Oregon, and I found speed all over again. Central Oregon is a great mecca for crystal meth, and I could drink with impunity. And so high school was really a lot of fun for me. I barely showed up to any classes, and I was 6 feet tall. I weighed 100 pounds. I thought I was Superman, and I was dying. So by 17, my dad decided they needed to intervene. I'd already moved out of the house. My dad and I had gotten in a fist fight over breakfast, and because that's what drug addicts do. We find violent solutions to the fact that I didn't want eggs, and and that's the kind of person I was. So I had moved out of the house at 16, and I was living in this single-wide trailer that you could push on the walls and see the ground outside. We were paying our rent and speed, and it was just it was a dismal place. I had two roommates. One had just gotten out of Eastern Oregon State Pen, and the other was getting ready to go back. Our rent was $330 a month, and we could barely pay it between three of us. And, we had one working car. We were getting food boxes from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and that was on Thursdays. So whatever we ate for the week came in that box from the church on Thursdays, which when you're a tweaker is really surprising how long that can stretch. And we had 14 kittens, because for some reason tweakers like to collect cats. And my dad had these monthly dinners. So my dad, having a lot of time in Alcoholics Anonymous, he feeds all the people he sponsors, and he's done it my entire life. And he would have these monthly dinners, and I would show up for the monthly dinners and collect from newcomers that owed me money. Because guys that he was sponsoring were hitting bottom in my trailer. And that's fucked up. That was the picture of what his son looked like, is that guys were telling stories of their bottom in his son's trailer. And so they needed to do something, and he sponsored one of the corporals in this little town, Redmond, Oregon. And so Corporal Ludwig had told him they were getting ready to raid my trailer. Because it was a small town. Everybody knew what we were doing. And they were getting ready to raid our trailer. So he got me out of there minutes before they raided my trailer and sent me to a wonderful mental institution in northern Montana. And which was probably really good for me because I had been on an acid bender for about 6 months. And, because you can really drink with impunity on LSD. There's no off switch. And when I figured that out, I didn't ever want it to go away. That was like the perfect solution for me, was as much acid as I could eat without blacking out and as much liquor as I could drink. And it got to a point where somebody that was partying with me, and I was 17 years old, somebody asked me what it was like to be me. And I couldn't answer that question in English. So I wake up, a really good time to pull somebody out of a tweaker house is about 4 a.m. Because everybody's either passed out or really into investigating the inside of a radio. And so there's about 12 people crashing all over my house. One person is staring at the television with no signal on it because we didn't have cable, and it's just a blue screen, which now occurs to me why it annoys me at the shop when they leave the monitor on for the computer. And so that's what my dad and my brother decided. They were going to ask me if I wanted to go fishing with them. And I was like, yeah, let's go fishing. That sounds like a good idea. So they picked me up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I crawled into the back seat of the car, threw my leather jacket over my head, and woke up 4 states away in Montana in what I thought was the bait and tackle shop. Having a conversation with myself. With staff members of this institution around me, terrified because I was 6'4", jaundice, and under 100 pounds, talking to myself. And they hadn't seen anybody in my condition, because this was an institution for wayward rich kids. It was a really expensive place. It was an institution for suicidal rich kids. They didn't have any drug addicts there. They didn't know how to deal with my withdrawals, so they put me in solitary confinement because I was having violent withdrawals. And so I spent a year there, and about the first 6 weeks, I thought I had died. I was really convinced, because it was August and there was snow everywhere. Northern Montana doesn't have a lot of summer. And so it was August 31st, 1999, or 1998, and that was the first time I got sober, August 31st, 1998. And I was 17 years old, and I had no idea where I was. I was completely out of my mind, and I thought I had died. I thought, okay, this is hell for me. My behavior has sent me to hell. I've died, and this is where I get to wake up, is in this weird dorm room with 20 other freaks, and I get to wake up here every day. And, so after a few months, things started to get right, and I did what I thought, everybody was going to be proud of, and I started a meeting there. And I started an Alateen meeting there, and we didn't do any of the steps, and we didn't do anything out of the book, and I was the only one there that knew anything about AA, but there were a couple other potheads, and that's what we did every day for an hour a day. And finally, I got the opportunity to leave. And so my dad, the day he dropped me off, I looked him in the eyes, and I promised when I got out I'd kill him, and I meant it. And he knew I meant it. So they moved, and they didn't tell me they moved. They didn't tell me where, they didn't tell me when, because they were terrified of me. And so finally, after a year of being in this institution, they weren't as scared. And they told me that they had moved to Florida with my girlfriend, and that it was time for me to come home, and that they would really like me to join them down there. And so I got the opportunity to leave, and I did. I jumped on a plane, and I went down there, and I stayed dry for a while, and I loved Florida. It was warm, because Montana was not. And I remember the first cheeseburger at Denny's, of all places, which now I would, be an elitist cook and think that a Denny's cheeseburger was terrible. But after eating the food I ate there for a year, that first cheeseburger from Denny's was like having a miracle in my hands. I'd never been so grateful in my life. And but I was in a situation where I'd been in an institution for a year. I had no idea how to talk to people. I had no idea how to be a person. And I had a ready-made relationship and an apartment. And all of a sudden, I was an adult. I was 18 years old. I was living with my girlfriend on an apartment on the beach in Boca Raton, Florida. And I didn't know how to be a human. So I did what I knew best how to do. I went to work. And the only thing I knew how to do was sell dope. So I got a job in a telemarketing phone room. And I sold fake vacations and cocaine. And in Oakland Park in Fort Lauderdale. And that was what I did. And I made a lot of money. I made a lot of money doing it. And so it was like I immediately got back into doing third. But somehow I managed to stay dry through it. Somehow I managed to stay dry doing it. I still had this huge resentment against Alcoholics Anonymous because it was how I was parented. Every time I came into a problem or every time I had to talk to my dad about something, it was always, this too shall pass. Why don't you go help somebody? You should be grateful for that. And I'm sorry, a 15-year-old kid does not want to hear that. What I wanted to hear was, it's going to be okay. We can fix that. But I didn't know how to explain that. And my explaining is that I'm going to go smoke more dope just to piss you off. So I managed to keep things together for a minute, and then her and I couldn't figure out how to get along because, we hadn't seen each other in a year, and we were these two different people, and she was an alcoholic, and I was dry and a drug addict and an alcoholic, and she was still drinking, and I was resentful. And so we had this very abusive 9-month relationship, and it finally ended with her hitting me with a chair and stealing my dog, and I got an airplane ticket to Las Vegas to go back to live with her parents. And so now I lived alone. I lived alone in Boca Raton, Florida. I didn't have any friends because I didn't know how to make them. I had never made relationships that didn't involve me getting drugs or getting booze. I had no relationships that involved me getting what I needed. So I didn't know how to have those. And I wasn't doing that stuff. So I just kept doing dirt. And finally I had my buddy Anthony that I worked with and sold cocaine with moved in with me because that was a really good idea. And then I met a woman one morning naked on my couch. And I thought it was God's will for me. Because when you walk out of your bedroom and there's a woman on your couch naked and you didn't see her there the night before, something angelic happened. That was a miracle. And she started finishing my sentences, and I took the day off of work, and we moved in together 2 days later. Because I'm brilliant. And then my life got really interesting really fast. She was a call girl. My roommate was driving call girls. I had started driving call girls and selling cocaine, and then it went to running an escort service and selling cocaine and running girls. And I was doing all this dry. I hadn't gotten loaded yet, and I was completely out of my mind. And the next thing I know, we had to escape. We had to escape because one of her calls had been murdered with her in the room, and it was either by my roommate or my best friend at the time. And so as soon as the homicide detectives had left my driveway one night at midnight, we loaded up in my truck, and we moved to Oregon in the middle of the night. And that was my life dry. That was my life without Alcoholics Anonymous. Was trying to figure out how to dodge a murder rap because they thought it was me. Because my truck was there, and my girlfriend was there, and so was my roommate. And that was my life without Alcoholics Anonymous. Those are the things that I do dry. I still make the decisions of an alcoholic and a drug addict. So we did that. We moved to Oregon, and then we moved to northern Pennsylvania for a couple of weeks first, and then we finally made it to Oregon, and we stayed there for a couple of months and realized that we couldn't make any money there, and at least not the kind of money we were making. And because at 20 years old, the kind of money we were making, you can't make selling shoes at the Bon Marché. So we decided we were going to move back. So we kidnapped my best friend from high school and drove all the way back to Florida. And she got pregnant, moved back in with the guy she was dating before me, told me she was pregnant, and this was on Christmas Eve. And that she was moving to New Jersey with him and that the baby was probably mine. I finally drank that day. That was the day I drank. And then I hadn't really turned on the jets until 9 months later when the paternity test came back and the baby was mine. And then I really turned it up. And that's when I started drinking alcoholically. And I spent 2.5 years in a blackout. So from 22 to almost 25, I spent in a complete blackout, 24. And I drank every day until I woke up, like from the moment I woke up until wherever I passed out. And I ran through a string of really awful relationships. A cop's wife moved in with me at one point while I was in a blackout. I stayed with her for 3.5 years, and I don't know why she stuck around. You know, because when I'm drinking, I'm a liar, a cheat, and a thief. I'll steal your wallet and help you look for it. I'll steal your wife and smile in your face. And, I will do horrible things to get what I want and get what I need. Nobody in my life matters. When I'm drinking, I'm a complete sociopath. And so that's how I continued to live until I was absolutely suicidal. I'd been fired from the shop I broke in at. Tattooing's a huge part of my story. Tattooing got me sober. And I've been fired from that shop for the 3rd time. And I was working construction cleanup. I was pressure washing buildings and mansions after the construction crews finished. And working at this illegal tattoo shop. And working at this restaurant. So I'm working 3 crap jobs. I'm drinking around the clock. And in a blackout, I disappeared for 2 days and woke up in my bathtub with an empty 5th of Captain Morgan in one hand and a knife in the other. And I had cut half of this wrist. And I had this appointment to get tattooed by my best friend that day. And that was April 20th, 2005. That was the last day I drank. And he had a few years sober at the time. He had 7 years sober at the time. And, he knew that I was dry before, and we had a long history. We were friends for a long time. And we sat there and we talked all day while I shook and sweat, and we took breaks so that I could throw up. Because I had just been I'd been in the hospital the week before for alcoholic pancreatitis. Died in the emergency room. That was the 2nd time I had died from alcoholic pancreatitis. I shouldn't be here for all intents and purposes. Alcohol killed me twice. I spent a week throwing up blood, shitting myself. I couldn't get into a detox. And we were trying to find a bed, but I didn't have any money. I didn't have any insurance, so I couldn't get into treatment. I couldn't get into a detox. And in Florida, it's just as tricky as it is here. They got 2 state facilities, and if they don't have a bed, you wait on a list forever. And so I just sweated out on my couch. And by day 8, the shakes were finally gone enough for me to go back to work. The crew at the shop had offered me my job back. If I could not drink, I could have my job back. And they checked in on me every day, twice a day. Jason checked in on me at noon on his way to work, and Dave, the owner, checked in on me on his way home from work. And they took care of me. They dropped off food because by now the girl had moved out. And, I was alone getting sober on this couch, and I was dying inside, and I was dying in real life. And so they got me sober. They spun me dry, they took care of me, and they gave me my job back, and they gave me my life back. And I'm eternally grateful for both of them. And unfortunately, neither one of them are sober today. My mentor, the guy who taught me how to tattoo, is shooting dope in New York, and the guy that got us both sober and brought us both in blew his brains out a few years ago. And that's what happens when we relapse. Because alcoholics with any amount of time who can't come back eventually end it. That's what we do. And none of us get out messy, but we are the only kind of people that are asked if we could get sober or die an alcoholic death. We'll ask what kind of death. So I got tricked into doing the steps. I was in this tattoo shop, and now I'm dry again, and I know that I can't stand being dry, and I won't stay sober very long when I'm dry, and I hate my life, but it's better than drinking. I'm still angry, and all of us are sober, but dry. None of us, there's 5 of us alcoholics together in a room that aren't going to meetings. Nobody's got a sponsor. Just varying amount of times. Everybody wants to kill each other. We had fist fights break out in the middle of the shop between staff members. It was great. And so finally, my mom had given, while I was drinking before they were living in Florida, they moved to Mexico so they could stop watching me drink. And retire. For 2 reasons. We moved back to Mexico to retire, but they had to get out of there to stop watching me drink. And, but my mom, before they left, she left me Chuck Chamberlain's a new pair of glasses. And I kept it on my toilet. And I don't know why it stayed there, but I like reading when I'm going to the bathroom. And, So I'm reading Chuck Chamberlain's A New Pair of Glasses, dry as hell, and there's this bit about untreated alcoholism that happens to be on the page I'm on. And I called my mom and I was like, I've got it! The 5 of us all have untreated alcoholism. Brilliant. It's this epiphany. And my mom laughs at me, and she goes, yeah, sweetie, you do. So I went to a meeting. And I get to this meeting super early, and it's the lunch bunch in Boca Raton, and I get to this meeting really early, and I walk in the door, and I had this really long LeBray spike sticking out of my lip, and like, this old redneck behind that's secretary of the meeting at the time looks up at me and he goes, hey, how's that thing work when you kiss boys? So I grabbed a chair and went for him. And that's how I met my first sponsor, Glenn. Because he stopped me from hitting that gentleman with a chair. And he grabbed the chair from me, brought me outside, and was like, you know, I know your parents, and you really don't want to be known around here as the guy that hit the secretary with a chair in the meeting. And I said, why not? And he said, just because you're not going to stay around here very long if that's how you behave. He said, if you really want to get even with this guy, you'll show up every day. Just to piss him off. Man, and he knew how to get me going. Like, Glenn, man, he spotted me coming from a mile away. You know, he just knew what kind of person I was. And he kept telling me stuff like that. He's like, you know, you really want to know what'll get underneath this dude's skin? Why don't you start making the coffee so you have to get here before him? So he tricked me into doing service. You know, and then I was there every day, and then I had to talk to the guy every day, and then all of a sudden he goes, you know, what'll really get under this dude's skin? Start coming to the business meetings. You know, and so I started going to the business meeting, and then before I knew it, I was treasurer. They were handing me the money. They were like, I don't know if anybody here's been to South Florida, but Boca Raton is very wealthy. So I was riding my bicycle to this meeting with like 7 Bentleys in the parking lot. And they gave me the money. And then they gave me the keys. And then that guy stopped going to that meeting. And it really had nothing to do with me. But it did get me sober. And then so, like, Glenn kept doing that. He kept tricking me into doing stuff. And, man, I really love that, man, because he kept tricking me into doing the steps and being of service. And then finally, before I knew it, I had 3 years sober. I had 5 sponsees and every commitment at this meeting. And, you know, it was 5 days a week. It was my home group. And I was loving life. I felt good. I felt good about myself. I was making really good money. And I hadn't thought about any of it. And none of it was about me. And it was great. And I found my higher power by going through step 12, bringing other guys through the steps. You know, it wasn't until that moment when I started bringing other guys through the steps and started passing off some of those commitments and seeing the lights turn on in other alcoholics that I really got to understand what this thing was about and really got to be grateful for the adventure that Alcoholics Anonymous really is. You know, so then I was in this relationship with this beautiful woman who I'm still with today. We've been together 12 years. And she actually gave me my year medallion and was the first woman to ever say anything nice about me. She didn't know me very well at the time. So we move on, and I still have this problem with having relationships. I still don't know how to be involved in relationships. You know, my problem as an alcoholic was having my toes in a relationship and looking for the next one because I knew it was going to fail. The second they got to know me, they were out of there. You know, and that's how I felt about everything. That's how I felt about work relationships, friendships, romantic relationships. It's how I felt about everything. And my sponsor, Glenn, didn't know how to have relationships either. You know, he was 55 years old. He was single. He was kind of a womanizer. And that wasn't what I wanted. I really wanted to keep this woman in my life. And so I met a man named Mike, and him and these couple other guys that they called the God Squad talked about this thing. You know, they all talked about being in love with their wives, and one of them had been married 45 years. One of them had been married 50 years, and my sponsor, Mike, at the time, had been married 37 years. And I wanted to see how that was. Like, I really wanted to understand how they did that. And they talked about things like leaning into your relationships and being involved and experiencing other people. And I wanted to learn how they did that. So Mike brought me through the steps and taught me how to do that using the steps. Taught me how to do that using the steps and how to be involved in my sponsees' lives and be involved in my sponsor's life and be involved in people's lives as a member of service and to be helpful. And man, my whole world changed. I learned how to be a friend. I learned how to be a son. I learned how to be a husband, and I learned how to be a father now. And so at 3 years sober, after doing that with Mike, my son got kidnapped by his sister's dad. And it was the worst thing that ever happened to me in sobriety, and it was the best thing that's ever happened to me. Because through that, I got custody of him. And I've had custody of him for 8 years now. And he's a bright, shiny, 14-year-old punk rock kid that is fucking amazing and drives me insane. But I've just been thinking about it a lot lately because we just found out that his sister's dad died 3 weeks ago. He OD'd. And we knew it was coming, and we've been waiting for it for his mom for a while because she's still out there. She still thinks that she can figure out how to make this thing work. And I know in my heart of hearts that if she doesn't get this thing, if she doesn't eventually show up here, that, we're going to wind up going to her funeral. And it's not far off, I've lost 15 people to this disease since Thanksgiving. And it's kind of astronomical, when I'm thinking about it. My nanny in Florida died 2 days after Thanksgiving. A lot of the people, me and my buddy Trent, have been watching the people we got sober with, and like the East Coast, people are dropping like flies, and it's sad. It's really sad. This guy Gary Revolution at my home group, I love Alcoholics Anonymous because sometimes you get kooks in a room that you're afraid of, and they're scary and they're crazy, but sometimes that message that they have is so visceral. Gary was a guy that he had been in an AIDS coma for a long time, and he woke up, and he had gotten sober and in the 70s, and then went into a coma and woke up. And this guy had 30 years sober, spent 10 of it asleep, and woke up crazy. And he just would share the most insane stuff, but occasionally he would share like little gems about how he still stays sober. Like completely out of his mind, dual diagnosis with AIDS, and he's still sober. And this guy used to share, he would start every share crying about the amount of alcoholics that he'd watched die over 30 years. And he would keep a tally in a little notepad. And not just people that he knew, or just like people that had come in and out, and people that he had heard of passing away. And when I moved out here 8 years ago, he was at like 370. And that's the reality of this disease. And that's the reality of this disease for me. I know that I got another drink in me. I don't know that I can make it back. And that's part of what keeps me here. That is a huge part of what keeps me here. And keeps me doing the steps. I do my best to apply the steps in most of what I do. I'm still terrible at it. I make much smaller messes than I used to. And I make amends much earlier than I used to. And I clean stuff up a lot sooner, and that's the benefit of the steps. That's the benefit of having the tools of this program, is that, I still get to be human. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't make me any better than anybody else. It brings me up to normal living standards. It means that I get to do everything like everybody else out there in the world. I'm not a guru. I don't get to be any better. I get to actually do the dishes, make my bed, and go to fucking work every day. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous gives me. The fact that I can't do that with Alcoholics Anonymous is really apparent to me. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.